Welcome to Rocket with Chief. I'm your host, Daniel Robus, and today we are going where no Daniel should go unattended. We're joined by Avon Middleton, entrepreneur, marketer, businessman, top gear South African license holder, and founder of Clipping Point Media. Anyone who knows me even a little understands that the need for speed and petrol head are not labels which I hold. I'm more of a, slow down and let's run in the mountains where there are no vehicles kind of guy. So today is a drive down a road seldom traveled for me. Avon, not a newcomer to the world of marketing and agency life, infused with enthusiasm and positivity. Let's dive in. Avon, what is Clipping Point Media and how did you get into this?
Good morning, or hello, Daniel. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Yeah, that's an enthusiastic intro, I have to say. So,
I'll bring the energy, you bring the petrol.
Yeah, you bring energy for both of us. I like it. So Clipping Point Media is an agency. Essentially, it's an agency that focuses on helping clients, corporate clients, businesses build their brands, get closer to their consumers, and ultimately, hopefully, sell more products or services, whatever the case is. But we're an agency, full service. We everything from digital to advertising to PR to production. It's what we do. So yeah, we've been in the game for about 8 years now, which is scary to think about.
Awesome. And then you landed a coup. You got the license for Top Gear South Africa. Why is that quite significant for a small agency?
So it's significant. I think, first of all, it's the biggest motoring brand in the world. It's the biggest automotive publication brand in the world. So for us to land that small agency in SA is huge. We certainly didn't take it lightly. We didn't think we would get it, if I'm honest, but I'm incredibly motivated to do big things. And yeah, it's actually, not many people know this. This is the second time I've made a play for Top Gear. And yeah, on the second time, I suppose we got lucky. It's also significant for me personally. If you knew me when I was 13 or 14 years old, you'd know that I wanted to own a car magazine. My dad would tell you that. So my dad used to collect car magazines, and I obviously used to take them sort of secondhand from him and just read them from front to back, probably 10 times over every month. So, and I always wanted to be in this, let's call it, motoring media landscape. So when I was 14, it was a car magazine, but as you know, the world changes in terms of how we consume media. And so the idea was always the same, the execution possibly slightly augmented.
Where to from here? What's next? How do you go bigger than this?
Sure. So I think, getting it is one thing, but actually then running it is entirely another. So we're into our second year with the license, and we kind of went into it eyes open. I'm sure you know. I don't know if you know this, but we got the license in January 2020. Very excited, big vision and big plans. We were supposed to launch in April 2020, but we all know what happened in March 2020, and the world essentially came to a grinding halt. So we had to pause the launch, but probably 2 months after that, that word we hate to say now, lockdown, I think something like 40 publications closed in the country. So, obviously amid COVID and amid really tough economic times, printing's incredibly expensive, people had to be laid off, and a number of publications closed. And the question I got from many people was, surely you're not going to do this now. This just doesn't make sense at all. But we did it anyway, because we felt that we had a lot of reasons to continue with it. We had a lot of motivation to do it. And quite frankly, we were contractually obliged to do it. And so we did it anyway. And so, yeah, we're now 2 years in. And to be frank, 2022 is really for us the yardstick to say whether this is actually working or not. And it's certainly picked up. So in terms of your question, where do we go from here? Well, we go bigger and better. We grow this brand in South Africa to become better than it ever was. We obviously have big vision. We want to become the automotive publication of choice. We want to be the biggest in sales. We want to be the biggest in terms of website visitors, social media engagement, and all of those measurement sticks that we all like to look at. So we do want to be the biggest and best. We're certainly getting there. So yeah, so in terms of that vision, the top gear vision, that's where we want to go. But we're also looking to expand our publication portfolio. So we are looking at other titles and other publications that we want to either partner with or acquire. So that's kind of the next sort of step. And then, of course, Clipping Point Media is a business that we still have to grow as well. So yeah, that's kind of the, should I say, medium-term vision?
No, that's outstanding. So Clipping Point and Top Gear are on the same trajectory. We're going to be on a growth pattern, and this is born in Africa, moving into Africa. Let's rewind a little bit. Why start your own company? Why didn't you join the beast and go to one of the Sandton firms or even the Cape Town firms and accept a good job there? You would have been a good partner. You work hard. They would have been glad to have you.
Wow. So I've always been very privileged, I suppose, to know what I've always wanted to do. So, when you're 18, you're a teenager kind of finishing school and everyone's going, so what are you going to do with your life? I've always actually known exactly what I wanted to do with my life, thankfully. So running my own thing was always kind of part of the plan, because I knew that I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it as an employee. So essentially my plan was always become this media specialist, this media person who's an entrepreneur in the media space. Because you got to understand where I come from and kind of how I grew up. Media was a smallish thing. To understand that one could commercially make a living off things like publications and TV and film, and it was relatively foreign. So for me, I always wanted to do that, and the only way I could do it was to start my own business. But I couldn't, I didn't sort of start a business when I was just out of varsity. I have worked for a number of companies. I've spent a lot of time in agencies. My first job was agencies. And then I went into television broadcasting, and then I went into corporate. I was a media manager for a fairly significant corporate company in the entertainment space. So I have sort of done that. Okay. And I think it was 2013, I decided that I think I need to start working towards starting my own business. And so it was a 2-year journey where, I sort of learned things and saved up money and got mentorship from amazing people about entrepreneurship and the pros and cons. It's not all sexy and great. It's quite a hard thing to do. So
well, we're going to be diving into that, because you didn't just become successful, did you? No. What is the biggest challenge of running a media company based in South Africa for you?
Sure. So entrepreneurship, unfortunately, is something they don't teach you at school. And as much as I think there are entrepreneurship sort of subjects, and I think if you go to a business school, you may get a bit of that. But I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was learning how, in a sense, the system, if I could call it, doesn't support small business. There's a number of initiatives out there that are designed to support small business, but the barriers to entry are pretty high. So I think, and that's got to do with things like access to money. It's got to do with tax. It's got to do with cash flow and protecting that. It's got to do with legislation that's in place that I think doesn't protect small businesses. And so this is why small businesses come and go like, I don't know, it's quite a common thing to hear of someone started a business and then it stopped, and then they started another one and it stopped. I think small businesses close quite regularly. So, and I think that's part of the problem. So I think big things,
So
there
it's
would
the
be
debt
cash
stacked against them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just difficult to start.
Okay.
I suppose it's like trying to get a job when you're 18 and you've got no experience. It's kind of, how do I start? How do I get somebody to trust me with their brand or their money, or and that's a hard thing to do. But also there's no, things like incubation hubs and things like mentorship programs is so important, but there's nothing formalized around that stuff. I mean, there's a few, sure, but I think access to that, knowledge of that is not free flowing, So I'm a big sort of, I push mentorship in a big way, and mentorship is really learning from those that have gone before you. So that's a big thing for me. And then the other thing for me, I think, is also small companies, because they're small, get bullied by big companies. So I'll give you an example. Big corporate company uses your services, but ties you into a 90-day payment contract. And because you want the work, you say, well, okay, what else could you do? Because if you say, no, sorry, I want my money up front, or I want it in 30 days, they'll just say, my favorite one is, it's our policy. So in other words, it's non-negotiable. But what that essentially does is it puts a small business on the back foot before you've even done the job. Absolutely. You're already starting at the back. So that's a big thing for me, which I think corporate South Africa could change.
Tell me your 3 tips to starting your own business. What are those? Or to getting through the first year? What are your 3 tips?
So tip number 1 is cash flow is everything. So manage your cash flow. And that can be done in a number of ways. If you're good with accounting and that sort of stuff, teach yourself, get acquainted with cash flow forecasting. Do all that stuff. The cash flow is everything. And then I think right from the get-go, be quite bullish about how and when you get paid, if you can. And you'll have to obviously learn the ropes on that. But I think sometimes it takes people way too long to understand that cash is king. But I can tell you that up front. And then I suppose it's quite a cliche, but just start. You can't do it if you haven't started. A lot of people talk a lot. They procrastinate about starting a business because there's fear and anxiety around it, understandably. But, just start. Nobody can use you if they can't use you, So that's probably...
I love that.
And then I think, lastly, is as much as I'm saying just start, don't be naive about what it takes to start. So do your research, find your market, do some R&D on your product if that's what it is. Try to find exactly what you're doing, do the research. And if you can, so I was privileged in that I had a really good job before I started my business. But what I did for 2 years is I saved money, and I just put money aside so that when I did start my business, I at least had something to get me going. So, I always hear that Elon Musk thing about having, startup parties, or startup showers, where you start a business and your friends come and bring you resources to kind of get you going. Obviously that doesn't happen, but, having a little bit of money set aside helps you, buy the computers, buy the printer, or whatever it is. Paying an accountant is incredibly important. I'd call that tip number 4. Keep an eye on your money. I think a lot of the time people just kind of wing it and don't have a sort of solid hand on their books. Do that, but that costs money. You want a good accounting package that is well set up, costs you money every month. Licenses, maybe for your software licenses, whatever the case, that stuff costs you money. So I think the tip is just be prepared. Try to be as prepared as possible, but don't prepare so long that you never start.
Yes, I really like that. I've taken that as your mic drop. nobody can use you if they can't use you. So when you've set this foundation up, technology obviously plays a role in your environment. What are your go-to apps in your toolbox that make you more effective or efficient than other businesses?
Obviously, in my business, what we do is we create. We're creative and we produce a lot of stuff. So we've had to find the most cost-efficient but effective ways of producing. So we're big clients of Adobe, and we use a number of Adobe products, the entire Adobe suite in some way, shape, or form. So we've got everything from Photoshop to Illustrator to video editing programs to Acrobat, the whole work. So that's something I just can't do without. And when they change it to a sort of license model, I was a little bit like, they've got me in. But it is what it is, and it's a very important tool in our toolbox, and it certainly pays itself off, over time. And then, as I mentioned, accounting is very important. So, we currently use Sage Accounting. I don't know if I can mention that, but
yeah, for sure. So the online perspective of it, the ease of use is their accounting package for business people. Okay.
Yeah, and I think people. So what I have found is there are a lot of free tools. There's a lot of free stuff out there. There's something called Wave Accounting, which is a free accounting package, great for startups. It costs you nothing. You can invoice, you can put your expenses in there, you can do quotes, you can send out statements. It does a lot of that stuff. And I would certainly suggest that to small businesses if you can't afford a Sage kind of package. Sage is almost a little bit more advanced. It starts to assist you with tax, which is of course a huge thing in business. So I think Sage for me has been very helpful. And then of course what we do is we create in a world where we've got to be on trend. We've got to know what's going on. We've got to learn what the world is doing and saying and kind of keep up with that so that we can be relevant or certainly help our clients be relevant. So a big thing for us is social media. We spend a lot of time on social media, but not kind of scrolling through Instagram, liking pictures, but actually just seeing what people are doing, seeing what people are checking. We've got a monthly sort of section in our status meetings as a team where every month one person presents what they think is a new and emerging trend in the world. So obviously the way they do that is they do that by spending a little bit of time on social, spending a little bit of time online or in the news, and just finding out what customers and consumers are doing, obviously within our space. We've got Google Alerts, which run for a lot of, we call them keywords, just things that we're trying to keep a bead on. And so every day we all get mails from Google with news and stuff that's come out in the news about certain subject matter. So that's quite helpful to us as well. And then for me, just a personal thing, I'm very passionate about what I do. And so I try to spend as much time in it as possible. So I listen to a lot of books. So I use Amazon's Audible app quite a lot. And then I spend a lot of time in podcasts.
Come on, give me a couple. We need a couple of titles. So
if you're into podcasts, something I've just discovered, it's not new, but I've just discovered it probably a month ago, How to Change the World. It's a podcast series. And it's probably on all the other, all the podcast platforms, but I obviously use Apple Podcasts, and it's How to Change the World. And essentially it is, it looks at various leaders, various people who essentially changed the world in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. It goes into their history, it goes into their story. So that, one that I was listening to yesterday was I've forgotten his name actually, but the guy who started Walmart. And it's his whole life story, which is just fascinating. Wow. He passed away last week, I think. So,
oh, wow. Oh, sorry for that.
So How to Change the World?
I never knew.
Obviously, I'm a car person, so I listen to a lot of Formula One news. I spend a lot of time in Formula One. So Beyond the Grid is a great podcast. There's another one called Bring Back V10 Engines that I really love. I mean, that's just
I
not
can
not
guarantee you it's not one I'm going to be listening to. Bring back V10 engines. Oh my word. All the greenies have just gone, no, Avon, no, don't do it, man.
It's really not, it's not what the name says. I mean, there's a lot more depth to it. Just trust me on this, okay?
So, Avon, you've gone on this journey, you've saved up, you sound very practical and that. What's the biggest mistake you made whilst getting going? What was one where you kick yourself regularly and you said, damn, that was stupid?
So I think the first thing to say is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to make tons of mistakes. It's just the nature of the game. Entrepreneurship is something of a gamble. So I'll say that up front, I've made plenty mistakes. Probably two sit with me, have sat with me longer than the others. So the one is, I think, chasing the money can be a mistake. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. When we set out to start this business, we had a vision. We knew what we wanted to do. We knew why we wanted to do it. And that's kind of where things started. And somewhere along the way, a few years in, we were, I'll call it, distracted by this, I suppose, the allure of another revenue channel, money. Okay. Where we kind of, it was a very large stretch. You know, it was taking my business on a tangent that was never part of our vision. And I mean, I can tell you, we have a big vision, which allows for lots of, you know, change and growth. But this was very different to what we had initially set out to do. And we almost got sucked into this idea of doing something really big and something really, you know, that we felt was going to make us a lot of money. That's really the motivation. But it was just totally the wrong decision, because we were getting into a level of expertise in business that none of my team had experience with. We were partnering with a business who we didn't know, and actually learned much later that they didn't have experience in it either. And so we went down this path of chasing this thing and trying to build it. And in the end, it was the worst decision. We lost a lot of money, we lost a lot of time. And probably the worst thing is we lost a lot of ground with our already built business and clients, because it kind of took our attention away from them. So I think just be careful about going to anything that might have commercial legs, you know, just, yeah. So I think that's
lights. Don't get distracted by the flashing lights.
Yeah, and there'll be lots of them,
Sure.
And because you're an entrepreneur, you'll think I have the freedom to just sort of chop and change. But for us, that was certainly a really big, I mean, Top Gear, for instance, was an offshoot, but it was always within our vision. And as much as it's a separate business and a different business, it was always within the vision. Whereas this other thing, which I'll tell you was in the eventing space, was just not. So that's probably the one. And then the other thing, which I kind of have mentioned, is just protect your cash. So just we made the mistake.
So you've had a couple of lean months where everyone sees you driving a fancy car, but it's actually, hey, but yeah.
You know, even before Top Gear, I wouldn't call them lean months. I think we had probably 18 months of just really tough going. And the reason was because, and this is what I said in the beginning about being bullish about your payment terms, for instance. But we all of a sudden had this sort of period where we realized we were signed into 90 and 120-day deals with our biggest clients. But it was actually we were just getting deeper and deeper, because you know, whilst you're servicing those clients, you're also trying to build with new clients, and maybe hiring more people and trying to grow, but you're always on the back foot in terms of cash. And so you're always spending money that you don't have, essentially. And I think that's a biggie. So just protect your cash and be very aware of what your future cash flow looks like before you make decisions today that only in 3 months' time are going to bite you.
Sure, Avon, there's a lot of wisdom in there. That's really, there's a lot of wisdom in there. Avon, who's the leader who you want to model yourself on? Who's the Avon that you'd like to see, that you would like to emulate? And then B, what's the company that you would like Clipping Point and yourselves to grow into?
Sure. So I think my life's been changed and shifted by a few different leaders, if I could call them that. The thing with leadership, there's some leaders who are great, and then there's some leaders who are not so great. But you learn so much from both of them. And so in my journey, I've had, managers who were not good, managers who just sort of, I wouldn't say tore me down, but just kind of, it was a job, just do your job and go home, and that was it. And then I've had leaders who, thankfully, one of which has now become my mentor, who empowered me, who stretched me a little, who helped me look beyond the job and kind of helped me realize the potential that I had rather than the now. And I think for me, those are good leaders who can open your eyes to possibility and obviously stretch you and make you achieve more, and, all those things that we want from our employees. So yeah, I had a manager who I look up to this day. I'm still actually very good friends with him. He mentors me on some of my business decisions. So that's someone who I certainly look up to. I also look up to my father. He's been a great mentor to me, but more so on a life level where, my dad's come from a very poor background and managed to sort of, build an incredible life for himself and for his children. And that journey, I've learned a lot from that journey. And only in your adulthood, you actually get to talk to your dad and go, how did that happen? And how did, when you're a kid, you're just in this sort of, you're just at home and you don't really realize what's going on. But I'll probably say in the last 10 years, my dad and I have just had so many conversations about life, which have shaped how I do business. And then, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I try to ensure that despite how much love I have for my businesses, I try to run them through my faith in the sense of my business is not everything. And my business can very quickly become an idol. It can very quickly become the most important thing in my life. But I think through my faith, I've had to just, I've learned balance. I've learned to know that this is not everything. God's given me this business. He's given me the opportunity with Top Gear. He's given me Clipping Point. The fact that we're still running is actually his decision. And so I think that, I hope for the most part, keeps me somewhat humble. And then in terms of who we want to become, Daniel, my goal is, I set goals. I'm very practical like that, as you said. I set goals to say, right, by 2025, I do want to be the biggest car magazine in the country with Top Gear. I have some revenue goals every year. I have some client goals every year. Because my business at the end of the day is practical, but I also want it to be a business that shapes society. So I don't know if you know this, there are no Black-owned automotive media companies out there. And that's something that's important to me. My partner is Black, and we are motivated to grow a business that is empowered and looks like the South African, looks like a South African business, if that makes sense, sort of homegrown. We're investing into people. So if you look at our team, we have a team that is young, dynamic. We also have some more experienced guys, but we're intent on growing and hiring Black people, Black women, of which, I'll be honest, there's just none in the industry. And that's very important to us. So we want to be a business with, in 5 years' time, when you look at us, you go, wow, they've built a a business that looks like South Africa, because I think, unfortunately, in the space I play in, there's not many of them.
Avon, just strength to you on that, just strength to you on that. And servant leadership seems to be the theme that comes through in where you want to go and what you do. If you were speaking to a group of young people considering building a life in South Africa or moving, what would your message be to them?
Sure. We have an amazing country. It's amazing in its opportunity. It's amazing in how it was laid out. We do live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. But I also think as a people, I don't know, there's just a strength to South Africans that I'm not sure you see in Europe, for example. And that's entirely obviously a personal opinion, but I think there's just so much opportunity in South Africa, and I think there's so much potential to do amazing things. I mean, I'm so taken by black coffee winning a Grammy Award. But what people also don't know is that there was another smaller DJ that also won a Grammy Award, also South African. And, you know, we're living in a time when 2 South Africans can win Grammy Awards on the same night. The biggest awards show in the world, generally dominated by, you know, non-South Africans. You know, it's always been something that's been owned by America and, you know, Europe, but, you know, that's the potential we have. I was very privileged to visit a Formula One race in Monaco a few years back. And, you know, Monaco F1 is like, it's like a religion. And I mean, the place is packed, it's just pumping with people. But we go around this, we were walking the streets of Monaco, and we go around this one corner, and there's this huge billboard of black coffee. And, you know, I'm not sort of this black coffee kind of crazy fan, but it's just to see a billboard with a person from your country who's just come out of, you know, nowhere in a sense, to be on the world stage in Monaco, the most expensive, glitzy city probably in the world, on a weekend that is probably the most, you know, expensive and glitzy weekend in the world, was just, it was just a picture for me of what's possible. And I think, you know, what I see every day in what we do is people who are passionate. We've got a passionate, you know, we're a passionate nation. We love stuff. We love, you know, I mean, in my industry, there's so many young kids that love what we do. And we were privileged last year to do, we had something called Speed Week, which was it's essentially our car of the year, performance car of the year. So we had 15 performance cars, everything from, you know, McLarens to hot hatches. I mean, it was just like, if you love cars, it was everything. And we had this week where we test these cars to find out what we think is the best. But what we did, which in hindsight was the best decision we ever made, was we partnered with the local government in the Free State, and they brought schools to come and see what we do. And then we did this whole talk around what we do, and, you know, everyone from the cameraman to the photographers to the editor to the drivers. You know, we had a race driver there, and we had about 150 matric and grade 11 pupils that we spoke to. And just for them, and I heard a few of them say, I can't believe this is possible. Like, you actually do this for a living and you make money from it and you love what you like. There was just this like mind shift, and I think that's all we need. We just need people to believe in themselves, and the only way they can believe in themselves is if they believe it's possible. And so, yeah, I guess it's a long way to answer your question, but
I love it.
The answer is,
I love it.
We live in a place where the possibilities are endless. And so, yeah, don't limit your thinking to what you know now. Just almost unlimit your thinking, and then we can go places.
Awesome. If you could choose a petrol person to interview around the world, who would it be?
Wow, I have a few.
Give me two.
So there is a guy who works for Porsche. He is the head of Porsche's GT division. So essentially what this guy does is he takes a Porsche 911, really fast car already, and he makes them much faster. And
he's the redneck of Porsche.
Yeah, I mean, he's crazy, quite frankly, but I love him because, you know, he does what you just go, there's no way. And then he does it. And so if you're a petrol head, you know, and I think what's also cool is it's not anyone that can buy that car. It's obviously a very limited, it's a very special car, but I would love to just get into the mind of someone like that, you know, because he's clearly crazy. But I think, you know how they say, you know, genius and crazy sort of live very close to each other.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd love to just be a part of that man's mind to understand, because incredibly successful part of Porsche. In fact, Porsche, I don't know if you know, is one of the most profitable car companies in the world, but I think it's because they're a little bit crazy. You know, most car companies will just go, no, let's do what's safe and volume and, you know, sell as many as possible, etc. But yeah, there's this guy who's head of GT, and he's been there a while now, but I'd love to get into his mind.
Has he got a name?
We call him Mr. He's German, Pröninger.
Okay, so if anyone listening knows Mr. Pröninger, put him in touch with Avon, and I would love to interview him.
I'd love to.
And now I'm sure you've been asked this so often. What was the most underwhelming car that you've got to drive?
Underwhelming. Wow.
Yeah, underwhelming.
I think a Datsun Go. Probably.
Okay, I'll do the obvious question. Okay, let's talk. What blew you away and you were on cloud 9 for a week after driving it?
Well, can I just finish with the Datsun Go?
Of course you can, but it was just, your face just dropped so much. It was like, oh,
I need to explain it, because, you know, the job I do, I should be saying there's a place for a Datsun Go. But truthfully, I jumped into the car and just thought, you know, the brief for that was build the most uninspired car ever. And I can just not see a place for that to be a good thing. It just does, you know, it's like build the worst possible car, you know, that can never be good. I can understand someone saying build a cheap car, but has a little bit of desirability so that people buy it. No, the Datsun just felt like whoever briefed it in was just not happy that day.
It was perfect.
You know,
so it's the Datsun.
Okay, so then the most amazing
Datsun was it?
Go.
The Datsun Go. I'm going to Google that car. We're going to put it on there so that people can see an image. Okay, the obvious question, the easy question. What was the vehicle that you drove?
So this is not the easy question. This is actually the worst question for a motoring journalist, because we drive so many amazing cars. So I don't have one. I have probably three. So probably the car that will always, it's my go-to car, and it's a Porsche 911. It's just, whether you like cars or you don't like cars, you jump into a 911, you'll be happy. It's a stunning car. A car that punches above its weight, let me say. I was very fortunate to drive a Bentley Continental GT Speed not too long ago. It's a 7 million rand car, thereabouts. But just the guy that handed me the keys said, if you don't come back and say this is the best car in the world, there's something wrong with you.
Okay.
And he was close to right. It's just an incredible piece of kit. It's very fancy, and it's very glitzy, and it's very expensive, I know, but it is a stunning car. And
but
then,
it's not a Golf GTI. I mean, let's just get that straight.
No, but you know what? A Golf GTI is fantastic. You shouldn't have said gold. I mean, it's a fantastic car. It's just it's a car, almost like the opposite of the Datsun Go. The people who build Bentleys are so inspired by what they do. I'll just, if I can just tell you a little story. It has this mechanism on the dash so it's the screen. But when the car's off, it's just this wooden panel, or whatever you've finished your car in.
Rosewood panel. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And then when you start the car, this screen sort of swivels open, and it's this touch screen. But if you're just not in the mood for that, for instance, there's another panel on it. So it's a prismic panel. And it's got, your oil and your clock and your engine temps. But I can't tell you, they spent a year just figuring out the mechanism to open that screen. And it's not to say there was no mechanism. It was figuring it out to make it open in a Bentley way, because it's completely silent. It's completely seamless. You won't hear it, but it's beautiful. And that's kind of how they built the entire car. Is just, they care, it's just because they can, I suppose. So yeah, that's one. And then I think the last one, which I have to say, I've been very privileged. It's not something you can go out and buy, but I've driven a Formula One car before. And to this day, it was a while ago, to this day, I think people who watch Formula One have no concept of just how hard it is to go quickly.
Really, eh? You don't just slam it into first gear, put your foot down.
No, it's such a complex bit of machinery, but it's so fast. I cannot. It's one of those things. It's probably one of the only cars that just can't explain how fast it is. And people see the speed, but the one thing that stays with me is hitting the brakes. Is literally like slamming into a wall every time. It is just violent, just ferocious braking. And I love Formula One, always have, but after I drove the car, I had a lot more respect for those guys, because
everybody who watches Drive to Survive or whatever the show is about the Formula One just says it's a different world. You've lived that world. That's amazing. Tell me, in wrap up, what have we got for Top Gear? What's coming out that you're excited about in the next quarter? What should our listeners be looking for?
Sure. So Top Gear turns 1 next month. Top Gear magazine, that is the printed magazine. So Top Gear has digital website, topgear.co.za, and then of course the magazine that hits that goes to shelves nationwide every month. So next month is our anniversary edition. We turn 1. And so we've got some really exciting stuff in there. We've got some reader competitions. We've got stuff for readers to do, which I can't share just yet, but next month it's going to be our birthday bumper edition. You know what? The world has opened up. We have an amazing cover. The mag will go to shelves in 2 weeks' time, Friday. We have an amazing cover. We were given an exclusive trip to Portugal to drive a very special GT4 RS. We were the only publication that drove the car, and just incredible. So I mean, if you love cars, that's it. And then if you're considering this electric life, electric cars are a thing. I was very privileged also to go to France to drive a new BMW electric car that's coming through in the next sort of 4 months or so. So that's featured in the mag as well. Just think of the BMW you may drive right now. Just happens to have an electric motor underneath it, and it's completely silent, and you charge it at home like you plug in your iPhone. So that's coming out. And then I think exciting thing, we're doing a movie premiere for our readers. Top Gun is coming out end of May. If you're a Top Gun fan, just keep your eye on our website and social media channels. But we're doing a movie premiere in partnership with Universal Pictures, and we're going to be inviting some readers to these premieres in Cape Town, Durban, and Joburg. And that'll just be a nice thing for us to hang out with, our readers and get to watch an amazing movie. Top Gun is in my top 5 best films of all time. So we can have a whole chat about Top Gun.
You're such a petrol geek. That's fantastic. Avon Middleton, thank you for joining us. When you listen to this podcast or watch this YouTube podcast, folks, those things will have come to pass, because Avon is going to be in season 2. I just want to thank you for your time, Avon. I love your tips for starting a business, for running it successfully. I love your view on leadership and servant leadership. And I know that your family is very close to your heart, and being a father and being a husband is important to you. And we just want to honor you for those things and wish you all the best. May you guys go from strength to strength to strength. And life rocks if you let it and you lead it the way you do, Avon. You're an example to a lot of us. So good luck and have an amazing, amazing next season.
Thank you, Daniel. I really, really appreciate it. It was a great chat. Thank you. Thank you.